Welcome back, government and economics students, to video lecture number 4 in this series dedicated to the political process, and in particular, political parties. And this is part 2 of a lecture that we started yesterday. And I'd like to start with a very brief quotation, if you will, from political science scholar E. Schattschneider. What a name, Schattschneider. Don't worry about spelling it. But he wrote, and I quote, "Modern democratic politics are unthinkable except in terms of parties," end quote. And I think that captures the reality that we were trying to develop in the last lecture, looking into the history of political parties and beginning with the founding fathers and their sort of suspicions and concerns about factions, what we today call parties, and how they would divide, create the grounds for arguments, fighting, and that the public good would somehow be lost or sacrificed. Yet today, I think that E. Schattschneider, again, what a name, I think is correct when he argues in a book that we can't really think about politics, at least in our democratic system, in the American political tradition that we've been studying this year, except in terms of parties. And today, of course, we have two main parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. There are a number of other minor parties that appear from time to time. The Libertarian, there's been the Socialist Party, a Communist Party, workers' parties, various independent parties. The Tea Party today really isn't a party in a traditional sense, but nonetheless it claims to be a party. So there's something, I think, to the comment by Professor Schneider. And somebody just got a message. Wonder what that is. But at any rate, today we're going to look into what political parties do. So let's get started. So what do political parties do? And I think that we can quickly boil it down into the essence. So these are maybe the ingredients that go into the political party pie, if you will. And you can see some images there on the right-hand side of the screen. The elephant, the donkey, the two classic symbols that represent and epitomize the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. You can see a woman voting in a voting booth. You can see two people lecturing or debating each other from lecterns, a political debate and or discussion. And you can see the idea, that smiley face with the light bulb, new ideas. So let's just take a look at this. Parties, they provide channels through which ordinary folks can affect the actions of government at the national, state, and local levels, the three levels of our governmental system in the United States. So the parties are a way to connect the people to the government. That is the channel. And I think that is wonderfully simple, and hopefully that is not something that causes problems. Number two, parties give political leaders a reliable or loyal base of voters on which to build support for their party platform. And remember, party platform is the collection of ideas that a party stands for and that the party presents to the public. So parties need a loyal base of voters, groups of voters that are going to vote for them and get them elected into the various legislative branches or into the executive branch. Number three, parties offer a means for organizing dissent or opposition. So if a party is not in the majority, the party in power, they will be in the opposition. So, for example, the Republicans today don't control the White House. They don't control the Senate. So they are in the minority. They do control the House, however. So the Democrats are a majority party for the executive branch and the Senate, but the minority party in the House. And you can see how that kind of plays out. We've been talking about the various issues that we face as a nation and how the Congress in particular has been unwilling to rise to the challenge on occasion, the government shutdown, etc., etc. So parties offer a means for organizing dissent or opposition. Parties also act as the guardians of civil liberties, the oldies but goodies. Free speech, freedom of worship, freedom to petition, to assemble, to bear arms, property. So these are things that parties do. Parties also keep each other honest by fostering and allowing for debate between party members, and that keeps it real. That is, the other party can't get away with exaggerated claims or really far-out crazy ideas. The opposition party will also try to expose corruption when and where it exists, if it exists. The opposition party will point out deception and misinformation, or both parties, even the majority party about the minority party will do this. So parties really allow for a healthy debate in which the truth is supposed to prevail, or some version of the truth, if you will. That is, deception, misinformation by the other party is going to be exposed in the media. So that's an important thing. We should not underestimate that. Point number 4 there. Point number 5, already mentioned that parties keep it honest. Number 6, parties register folks to vote. You see the woman voting. Without voting, political leaders wouldn't be elected, I suppose, and then our system would sort of seemingly grind to a halt. So parties also, in addition to registering people to vote, they spread information about laws, about government programs and policies, so that people, the public, can take advantage of the things government does or can do for them. So that's also a very important function of political parties. Parties also recruit and screen candidates for public office and help them financing various media support, campaign support in elections. And that again involves spreading information and ideas that the party stands for. And last but not least, and also important, parties are the major forum for new policy ideas that serve and promote the common good, at least in theory. Now, parties have differing visions on a whole range of issues and challenges that confront our society, from economics and taxation to environmental and energy policy. However, the parties are really the place where we see new ideas. And it's always interesting when we have elections, such as the midterm elections in 2014 or the presidential elections in 2016, what new ideas are going to emerge during this election season. So that's what political parties do. Those are the 8 things, I think, that summarize and capture. We may have missed a few things. So if you have any questions about that, please stop the lecture and jot those down. Now, moving on, what is the main goal of political parties? And I think this is really easy to sum up. The main goal of political parties is to win elections, so that the party then has elected officials that can promote the party vision in government. And again, think of the national, the state, and local governments. Without winning elections, it's difficult for a party to present and promote its vision. Winning elections also allows the majority party a greater control, not total control, because the minority has its rights and its place. However, it allows the majority party greater control of public policy and implementation of government policies and programs, plus oversight. A good example of this, when President Obama was elected in 2008, took office in 2009, the Democrats controlled the White House and the Senate and the House. So they had majorities in the national government, and they used those majorities to pass healthcare reform. Now, of course, that's become quite controversial, but at the time, that's a good example of what a party can do if it wins elections. So hopefully that is quite clear, that parties, their main goal is to win elections. So let's take a look at 2 schools of thoughts that scholars have developed regarding parties. And the first is called the Big Tent, and you see that Big Tent picture there. Big Tent model, in which parties are loose coalitions or collections of like-minded people. In this model, the Democratic tent contains mostly liberal to moderate people and interest who favor using the power of government to affect economic, social, cultural, and change, aimed at creating more opportunity and or more equality in society. And today we would also maybe add more toleration of same-sex marriages, affirmative action programs to end centuries of racial discrimination, and etc. The Republican tent, on the other hand, tends to contain people who are more moderate to conservative, and they typically distrust government as a positive force or actor in the lives of citizens, and they rather believe and trust in the free market system to act as a guide and a referee to many of life's situations and challenges. So they promote traditional family, religious values and institutions. They are less tolerant of same-sex marriage. They tend to be more pro-prayer, more attached to moral teachings that you might find in various churches. So they have a healthy distrust of the government. And so these tents exist. They cut across, in some cases, race, class, ethnic background, and gender. So that's the big tent. It includes many different people from different walks of life, different colors, different ethnicities. And that's been around for quite a while. There's another party school of thought, and that's called the Responsible Party. And this is an alternative to the big tent model of political parties in that they feel that parties, and this model is, I should say, an abstract definition of what parties should be rather than what they are. So this responsible party idea is really a nice theory, what parties should be, but not what they are. In fact, parties are more often big tents, but the responsible party scholars and believers believe that, hey, parties shouldn't be big tents, but parties should rather be focused on narrow issues that are clearly defined, unwavering about what the party stands for, and therefore membership in the party will be reserved to those who support the party's vision. And that, again, that vision is strong, that vision is clear, and there really isn't room for a lot of diversity necessarily. So it's more about purity of ideas, and members are supposed to believe in the purity of the party. Therefore, there's not room for a lot of different voices, different people, different ages, etc. Again, however, the responsible party theory, while I like it in theory, it doesn't seem to capture the reality of political parties. And you might find the responsible party theory applying to something like the Tea Party movement, or the Socialist parties, or some of the Libertarian parties, some of the more minor parties that are on the fringes or on the margins, though influential. So I thought that would be important to mention. Another theory is the social network theory. So some scholars reject both the big tent and the responsible party models and instead argue that parties are really elaborate social networks of party officials, office holders, voters, interest groups, social movements, lobbyists, and media elements. Good gosh, that is a lot of different things. But there's some, I think, credence and something about this theory that I find attractive. And in fact, possibly the Tea Party would fall into the idea of a social network. It's not a real party, though it's aligned with the Republican Party. It's more broad-based, local, or grassroots social network that attracts billionaires, but also ordinary working-class folks who share the same values and mistrust of the national government, and they organize through social networks, whether they be in person or via different forms of electronic communication. So I think that in some ways, American political parties today are a combination really of the big tent model and the social network, again, with the responsible party idea being reserved to some of the smaller parties there. So moving on, before we end today's lecture, what about theories of political change? I find this to be interesting too. How often do political parties come and go in terms of their attractiveness, in terms of their being in the majority versus the minority? And there are two schools of thought that I think are interesting when we talk about this idea of the political system. And some scholars have identified major changes or shifts in party dominance about every 35 years, so a 35-year cycle. And historical studies show that each cycle starting in about 1830 and lasting down to the 1960s, there were really these 35-year cycles. And for 15 years, one party dominated the elections, won the elections, that is, followed by 15 to 20 years of competitive elections in which one side or the other, one party or the other, would win. So the cycle would then revert and repeat for another 35 years. So where are we today then? Well, today I think, and from the 1980s, we've been in a period of competitive political elections. We really haven't witnessed a time when one party has been the dominant party. From 1930 to 1960, the Democratic Party was really the dominant party, though there were Republican presidents, President Eisenhower, for example, and later Nixon. But for 30 or 30 plus years, the Democrats really ruled. That's no longer the case. We don't know whether the 35-year cycle will repeat, whether there will be a resurgence of a Republican Party or not. There are two theories quickly. The critical realignment theory put forward by V.O. Key in 1955, and he said, look, that certain elections contain really big issues, and when there are really big issues, you're going to see parties change. Slavery in 1860, the Great Depression and War in the 1930s and 40s, the Great Society in the 1960s, and then the Vietnam War and after. And then we have May Yu, who says all elections contain change. Thanks.